Shalom, guys. Okay, this is gonna take me a little bit of time to get used to again. I know most of you guys are probably like, what? Like, that was a year ago, Tiffany. Like, you're much better at this now. Like, this is a piece of cake for you. No, it's not. I just don't show you guys that part. I did leave a lot of that in there on purpose in my first video, maybe a few more, because Abba told me to do that. He told me to leave it in there. Okay, all right. Woo! I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Okay. Okay, you can do this. I can do this. I have run out of excuses to walk around the house and figure out why it's not time to come in here and press record. I think I need a pillow. And now I've really run out of excuses. Okay. All right. Why am I so afraid? But most of the time I just edit it out. It takes me a long time to warm up and get comfortable in front of the camera still. It never got any easier. Kind of seems like it gets harder sometimes. I think that's just because of the depth of the messages. Abba's been telling me that for whatever reason, he doesn't want my flaws hidden. My weaknesses are part of all this. In my first message, I talked about Moshe. He was scared. He didn't want to follow through with what Abba was telling him to do because it just seemed like too much. You want me to go and say what? But I'm slow to speak. So Abba chooses those with weaknesses. We all have them. So I am actually so blessed to be at my mom's rental house right now. She just happened to have this open and invited me to come and have this place to myself. And there are no kids, and there are no dogs, and there are no husbands. It is just me and Abba in this place. And I decided to record in front of my favorite painting, The Feet in the Sand, playing in Elohim's sandbox. So this message is about the planting place of name. Not only does this directly connect to my very first video on Shakan about how he chooses where his name dwells, but it is the entire meaning of all of my messages collectively. When he first told me that I was going to be doing the planting place of name next, I got so excited because he caused me to understand how special this message truly is. And then as he continued to teach me deeper and deeper about it and then connect it to so much, I actually started to get really nervous to do this video because it's so important. It's the most important message there is. Like I've told you guys before, I a lot of times am afraid that I'm not going to do these right, and that is, my own weakness. That's been a weakness that I've had since I was very little, and that is one of the strongholds that Abba has been tearing down and healing in me. The understanding that goes with this message, there's no words to put to it. There just simply aren't any English words or any way of delivering this message to convey the depth of its meaning. And that's the point, really, because you can't receive understanding from me or any other teacher. You have to receive it from him. There's been a lot of purpose in the time that has gone by since my last video. I wasn't expecting that, but he has totally made it obvious that he has been spending time with his children. He has been teaching his chosen this message. My messages are not to be so much teaching, but witnessing what he teaches through his living word. This channel is for those who desire relationship with him, and when we are in relationship with him, he is teaching us all the time through our living experiences, all of them. Hey, so I'm going to just be doing a few little inserts here and there. I'm just having too much fun now, and there's a few important things that I want to say. So first of all, we have been talking about the planting place of name for a little while now, and whether you are more new to this channel or you have been with this mishpacha for a while, this family, you know that we have been talking about this fellowship as being the planting place. And it is, but I want to make sure that everyone really understands that correctly before we go any further. So very simply, the planting place of name is us, the chosen ones, the Kodashim. We are where Yahweh plants his name. Yahweh chooses where his name dwells. The chosen ones who he chooses to receive his name, his mark. And even though right now we are living here on this earth temporarily and walking around in the scene, just like the living word came and did, the planting place is in the unseen, and we see that in the most sacred models as well, even in the physical. But the planting place is about our hearts and our minds. Now, we've studied those two words, heart and mind, and we've studied them as the same original word that was translated to heart in some places and mind in the other. Understand that in English, heart and mind do have different definitions. But when we see the word lev in scripture, it includes both of them. And that is because, remember, lev is the authority inside. It is who is the authority inside us. If we receive the living word of Yahweh, then it is Yahweh who is our authority. And he steers us then through our hearts and minds. It is important to understand that Yahweh's living word reigns from the unseen. And that was the point that he made while he was here. Chew on that. And no matter how much we talk about how much we love Alan, because we love him so much, it's important to understand that we don't worship Alan, and we're not yoked to him. This was the main purpose for the perfect timing of Alan's going home. Abba needed to remove Alan from the scene because there were too many who were yoked to him. I was yoked to him. No matter how much we miss him right now, and so excited to be with him again, it was a gift of Abba Father to take Alan home at the perfect time that he did, to strengthen our relationship with Yahweh. We are not to be steered by the scene alone. Yahweh only uses our experiences in the scene, but it is him that we are yoked to through his living word, who is unseen. Look at the picture for a second that I chose for this thumbnail. This is a model in the scene that our Abba uses to teach us through living experience, and we see this model all throughout his word. He has been teaching us so much about this model through his Otiot, his signs, and not just here in these studies, but in our living experiences alongside of these studies. Don't forget how ground and man are the same root word. We are the ground that is being planted in here. This is what the different types of soil are about in the parable of the sower. The seed represents the living word of Yahweh, the truth, our salvation, our healing. Yeshua HaMashiach means salvation through healing. This is a spiritual healing, an anointing. The hand that is planting is Yahweh. Yahweh is the gardener. Notice that this is a yod, which represents actions. It is also the first oath in the name Yahweh, which we will be talking about in this study. Remember how a yod is a yoke. Yahweh Elohim is our yoke, and He is the gardener. Don't forget about the beautiful way we see Yeshua and Yahweh being one when He appears to Miriam as the gardener. That is to be a model for us of the living word, Yeshua and Yahweh being echad, one. You will see in this study how it is Yahweh who raised up a planting place of name. Alan is a vessel, a very important vessel. Don't forget about what we learned in the Avraham study about Father Abraham and how when he was a little boy, he taught everyone how to make vessels to put on their plows, to plant the seeds under the ground so that the birds would not come and eat them. Every story that Abba has written down for us and recorded is so important, and the way that he's been teaching them to us and the order that he has been teaching them is so perfectly planned out and designed by him. This foundation that has been being laid. But first, what was old had to be tore down, and old roots needed to be yanked out. The entire book of Ezra is all about the foundation of the temple being laid. This all has spiritual meaning. The book of Maccabees is all about the temple being rededicated after it had been defiled. And then they came in and they cleansed the entire thing and rededicated it. Remember, we are the temple. We are the Mishkan, where He dwells, Shakan. We are the ground that has been being uprooted and cultivated, and then renewed seed has been planted. Yahweh is the master builder. Now remember back not too long ago, he kept having me repeat in the messages that the world's way of learning is building, but Abba Father's way of learning is washing and digging. Well, he's given me more understanding about that now. He was talking to us about that because that was our time of cultivation and uprooting and washing through these messages. And he wanted us to stay away from the world's way of learning, which is building in the seen. Yahweh's way of building is in the unseen. It is Him, His living word, and His Ruach that does the work in us. Yahweh Echad is the message that He's been giving us from the beginning. Yahweh in us. I don't know how long ago it was that Abba was telling me, well, at least I thought he was telling me that I was going to be doing a study video on his name, YHWH, and that made me nervous because I was like, that's got to be the most important video ever. But he assured me that he was going to be preparing me for it. That's what I understood. And then he started talking to me about the key of knowledge that was taken away. And then he was putting the two together, like the name of Yahweh is the key. But I knew that there was something that I just couldn't quite understand about that yet. I was telling him, okay, Abba, well, you're going to have to explain that to me fully. Hit me over to the head with it like 1,000,000 times. I got to get that message down pat before I deliver it, because I can't deliver that one wrong. I need to have it all figured out first. And then now come to realize as I look back ever since that time, that's exactly what he has been doing through these messages. He has been teaching us about his name, about who he is. He has been teaching us about YHWH, Yahweh in us. And he's been teaching it to us from the beginning. Yahweh chooses where his name dwells. Yahweh does not dwell in buildings made by the hands of man. He dwells in his own creation. Yahweh and his living word and his Ruach HaKodesh in us is Yahweh Echad. And this is the key that was taken away. The key of knowledge. The key of knowing who he is. Because people started looking to receive the truth from man instead of the living word of Yahweh. This is a message of freedom. A key goes into a hole and unlocks the door. This is the prison doors of our minds being unlocked and us set free. And this is us entering the kingdom of the Shamayim. This is what happens at full transformation. The completion of our healing. That's what the living word does. That's why his name is salvation. Because the living word of Yahweh saves by healing us from the inside. By transforming our minds and our hearts to understand who he is. Because we were yoked by the world. So now I'm going to remind you guys of something that I said in my last video. We were talking about reading scripture. I was saying when you're reading scripture, don't be afraid of the fact that there's a lot of mistranslations and you don't know what's what and what's right and wrong and you don't know how to interpret. Just read with Abba and rely on him to teach you and point things out to you and draw your attention to wherever. And when you're reading the word with him and you come to something that makes you pause and you're wondering about that, talk to Abba about that. And after I released that video, he reminded me of the example that he gave us, which is how we came to start talking about the planting place. So just after Alan went home, one of our mishpacha, Alex Dacri, he just put up a video from his heart and then he reads Ezekiel 34, the whole chapter, because Abba just put it on his heart to read it to the mishpacha. And so he reads the whole thing, and when he gets to the planting place of name, after he says it, he pauses, wondering about it for a second. And then he repeats it. Well, when he said planting place of name, my ears just perked up like a German shepherd. What is that? I have to know what that's about. That is something. And that was when my study in the planting place began. And we've been talking about it since then. So also, this message is way too big. It does not all fit into one video. So this is only the first video. I just wasn't able to fit it all. On the first day of recording, my storage ran out. And so then I had to come back the second day. I didn't even realize that, day one was, plenty enough for its own video. And so after I started editing, I realized wow, this is not going to be one video. As soon as I get this one up, I'm going to work on the next one right away because I got to get this thing out before we go home. So we're going to go back to the study now, but the first thing that I do is kind of skip through Ezekiel 34. So maybe pause the video and read the chapter by yourself. However, there are a few things throughout the chapter that are a little off and just need deeper. There's just not enough information there. So I actually start this study off by kind of jumping through a few of the verses just to give more deeper understanding from the Otiot. So this chapter is all about the shepherds, and he's sending a message, woe to the shepherds. And it says, woe to the shepherds of Yisrael who have been feeding themselves. And there's a deeper understanding of that. In the Otiot, it's not really so much that they're just feeding themselves. What it's really talking about is that the shepherds have been feeding on the wrong food themselves. They have been feeding on each other, feeding off of each other, feeding off of man. And then they're leading their flock according to their own wisdom that did not come from the living word. So this is about man leading astray through his own doctrine. And when it says, you have not strengthened the weak, nor have you healed the sick, nor bound up the broken, nor brought back the straying, nor sought what was lost. That's not quite what it's saying. What it's really saying there is that they have not been strengthened themselves, and they have not been being healed spiritually. And what's broken in them has not been being bound up, because they are not seeking what was lost. So they cannot be feeding good food when they themselves have not been feeding on the living word. It is the living word that heals us, that strengthens us, that binds up what was broken. And it is the living word that's been lost because his children forgot how to look for it. And it says they were scattered because there was no shepherd. That's not really true either. They were scattered because they didn't have the true shepherd. There were tons of shepherds, just like there's tons of shepherds today, but there were no shepherds that were feeding the right food. Now, what kind of food am I talking about? How can somebody else give you the living word? They can't. Nobody else can feed you the living word. But like I gave an example of when I first found Alan, what Abba really taught me through him is about going to him and not relying on Alan, because I was constantly asking Alan my questions, but Alan was not giving me satisfying answers that I wanted. He would always say, you need to take this to Elohim. This is something that you need to talk to him about. And remember, I told you, I thought I was. And I was, but I wasn't waiting for the answer. I wasn't kawa. I wasn't, I was going to man. I was impatient. I wanted the answer. And so it was faster to just get it from man. And so this is how the sheep were scattered. Now, this is giving us a visual in the scene of scattered sheep, scattered to the farthest ends of the earth. But this is really talking about spiritually. We were scattered to the farthest ends of the earth, meaning that our mind was turned, our attention was turned off of Yahuwah and seeking his living word, because man is always trying to give us answers for everything. Man thinks he has the answer to everything. I'm sure you probably know a few know-it-alls, We can all be know-it-alls at times. So, and I've been coming to a lot of places in the Word where it's been talking about our attention being drawn away. And this is how the seed of opposition works, trying to take our attention elsewhere instead of understanding that our Creator wants to have relationship with us and he wants to teach us through our living experiences, through life, just being with him, walking with him, living with him, talking to him, everything. But then Yahuwah says in verse 11, see, I myself shall search for my sheep and seek them out. And so he's talking about how he is going to gather his sheep himself. As a shepherd seeks out his flock on the day he is among his scattered sheep, so I shall seek out my sheep and deliver them from all the places where they were scattered in a day of cloud, dense cloud. Now actually, that right there, the cloud and dense cloud, there's so much there in the Otiot. It's actually talking about a day of affliction and judgment And it also talks about a day of watching, as well as a day when twisted man will be the one ruling and judging and saying what is right. And that word that I'm talking about that they used for dense cloud is spelled with the gain. So that's where I'm getting the twisted part from. It is gain, resh, pei, lamed. It's all about twisted man feeding and steering. So it's starting to sound a little familiar? This is where we are at. I shall bring them out from the peoples and gather them from the lands and shall bring them to their own land. Now, yes, this probably makes us think of going home, but there's more than that here because our home is the kingdom of the Shamayim. We're going to talk about that word later, actually. And the kingdom of Elohim is within us. So this is all leading up to the planting place and how he leads us and gathers us from within us. Now listen to this. I shall feed my flock and make them lie down. Now, yes, we have this beautiful childlike model of a flock that is laying down in a pasture. But there is another model here that is a more mature model, a more sacred model about what else happens when you are laying down. And he's talking about feeding them and making them lay down. Chew on that. Remember, feeding is about the living word, receiving the seed of the living word. He says, I shall feed them with right ruling. That word for right ruling there is shafat. We talked about that word a lot when we were studying Judges with Alan, because that's actually the word for judge. And Alan really kept making a strong point about how it wasn't judges. It just should have been judge, because there is one judge and he has many vessels, but there is one judge. And it's not about words that are written down on a page. And while we're talking about feeding, I want to just point out that in verse 23, he says, and I shall raise up over them one shepherd, my servant Dawid, and he shall feed them. Now let me take you into the depths of this. We've been talking about Dawid lately with the key study, because we see in scripture about the key of Dawid. Now, I want to point out that the name Dawid is spelled Dalet Wa Dalet, and that main root being Dalet Dalet, which actually is the word for breasts. It is two that dangle. And we know that the breasts are used for feeding. That is the very first thing that we desire when we come out of the womb. When we are born into this world and we are brought to our mother's bosom, the first thing that you see a baby doing with their pay is reaching, desiring to be fed. And this is all very purposeful teaching for us. It's very purposeful modeling. He talks about making a covenant with us, and then he says, and they shall dwell safely in the wilderness and sleep in the forest. And I want to talk about those two words really quick, wilderness and forest, because the word wilderness there, it is a mem in front of the word debar. So this is really talking about his order, his living word, which brings order. And we've been talking about mem a lot, and we're going to keep talking about it in this study as well, because it's all throughout the study. But mem is about frequency. It's about receiving the works of the living word in us, flowing through us. And of course, it's about Yahuwah's inner workings inside us. Okay, another little insert real quick. Some of you may have already noticed that this word I'm talking about is actually midbar. It is the word for numbers, like the name of one of the 5 books of the Torah. And we've always been taught that this word means in the wilderness. Why did they translate it to numbers? Because just look at this word here. This is the word dabar, and dabar meaning order. And remember, this is the same word as the living word. So this is actually the word for word, and it's talking about the word of Yahweh, the order of Yahweh. And if you think about numbers, they order things, number 1, number 2, number 3, put them in order. I personally would have picked a different translation, Anyways, so that whole story was this same example for us. It was about Yahweh giving his people back his order. And this is when he gave them his written word. Why? He needed to bring order back. This is why he took them into the wilderness for 40 years. Because it was about living experience. Our Abba teaching his way again, because they had been enslaved. What happens when you're enslaved? You are ruled by man. And they forgot how to think for themselves because they were just told what to do all the time. And this is when they were making bricks. And keep remembering this model that they were making bricks, because there's more. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it, because I've been thinking that Abba's going to have me do a 10 Commandments study. It just doesn't seem like there's time. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you now that the 10 Commandments that make us think that it's like 10 rules, it does not say do not, do not, do not, do not, do not. It is not 10 do nots. Okay? It is unyoke, unyoke, unyoke. It is Abba Father teaching his children that they have been yoked by the wrong master. And he is teaching them how to now unyoke themselves. And all the models are in the physical, because that's how the living word teaches. Remember, the living word teaches in parables. Why? Because it's not for everyone to enter into the kingdom of the Shamayim. These scriptures that were recorded for us have extremely deep spiritual meaning. Everything that has happened for a reason. So remember, Midbar, here translated wilderness, is about him feeding us with his living word and bringing back order, renewing our minds. Okay, I'll see you later. But also the word forest here, he says, and sleep in the forest. That word forest is about him knowing us. That root there is about being naked, actually. And specifically, it is see a man. It's about being bare. And this word is used throughout Scripture to talk about both the negative and positive sides of nakedness. And so in the negative, it's talking about, shameful nakedness. And then in the positive, it's talking about having nothing to hide. And as well as being intimate with somebody. You don't expose yourself unless you are being intimate. And so we know that intimacy is about knowing. We've been studying this, and he's been teaching us about this. And so this is about him knowing us. So that's what he means here, that we will dwell safely in his order, his living word, and understanding from him. And he is causing us to know him intimately because we are spending time together. We are getting to know each other deeper. He is revealing himself to us. And he talks about causing showers of beracha to come down on us in their season. So don't forget that we have seasons of things. And so it's very normal if you have a season that you're going through where you're receiving a lot of melta, and then all of a sudden you're going through a season of major trial. This back and forth is very important in our being made whole. Don't forget how a pearl is made, by an irritant, and much friction over time eventually makes a pearl. There's a lot of beautiful modeling there, actually. And they shall know that I am Yahweh when I have broken the bars of their yoke, and I shall deliver them from the hand of those who enslaved them. Now, this is all about our last message, about letting go, where he's been really teaching us to let go of everything, unyoking, not seeking provision from anywhere else. This is talking about, delivering us from the hand who enslaved us. This is the hand, the yod of the world, the yoke of the world that has been taming us and training us to follow their rules. Everything that's going on right now, it's all about enslavement. It's about looking to man and man's advice and wisdom and rules about safety, salvation. So now here we go. And I shall raise up for them a planting place of name. That's what we're going to study. And they shall know that I, Yahweh, their Elohim, am with them. With them. Let's look at that word with. Atem. It is Aleph Tau Mem. Aleph Tau is our journey through life, heading towards the mark. And that Mem is about his inner workings in us, his feeding us. He is in us, working in us. And you, my flock, the flock of my pasture, are men, and I am your Elohim. Now we're going to go into the Otiot for planting place of name, but I did do this briefly in the rod study as well. And we're also going to talk about the word for name, which we've done a tiny bit already. It is so important to understand the true meaning of a name. We will also begin to talk about the name Yahweh. The Matah Shem. Matah is Mem Tet Ayin today in modern times, but going back in ancient times, this word was actually spelled with a nun tet ayin, and it was also spelled with a mem nun together. So mnata. This word is about a plant. It talks about planting, like the act of planting seeds, and a lot of versions will translate this as garden. So of course, this being a place of planting seeds and what grows from a seed, this word is truly all about receiving messages, receiving the truth, receiving the Father's living word, then what grows from that. So you can already see the similarity of the rod, because the rod is a plant. And if you remember the story, this rod was a living branch where the liquid, the life inside of it, was contained, and this is how it was able to be planted in the garden of Moshe's father-in-law. And this is also why the almonds blossomed on Aaron's rod. This is the rod that blossomed. So the word rod being mem tet hey, they share this mem tet root. And mem tet means liquid contained inside, and it is the meaning of a branch. Now let's just talk about those two Otiot individually for a second. Mem we've obviously talked about a lot already. This is about the inner workings happening inside us. That mem is what is flowing through the veins of the trees. We've talked before about how, plants are planted in the ground and soak up the water, the mem, from the ground, and then it moves through the branches and everything, just like veins. And so mem also talks about blood. This is like the blood that is running through our veins, which means that we are living. Now, tet is the basket, and it talks about what is contained inside a basket. But there's a very important sacred meaning for Tet. It symbolizes the union of the groom and bride consummating with conception. So this is ancient understanding of this oat. But if you think about the mature model here, a basket for seeds, a basket that collects seeds. And this is actually the root meaning of Nun Tet, and that root means seed basket. It is a place where seeds are collected. So now think about the mature model. There's another word that it's translated, there's another meaning. It means bed. So this is why actually we call it a flower bed. You know, like when you have a garden and you say, hey, this is my flower bed. Well, it comes from this, and the beautiful sacred model that he gave us, the bed, is where intimacy happens. And we've talked about the other childlike model, about our intimacy of walking along the path, yoked to our Abba, being intimate with him. Well, what are we doing? What are the oxen doing while they're walking down the path to the mark from Aleph to Tau? They are plowing together. Okay, this is all very beautiful. The rod is the planter, the tool that is used for plowing. Don't forget that in the book of Yeshar, we read that Adam was the first one to be given the rod, and he tilled the ground with it. It was used as a plowing tool, okay? And the liquid inside the branch, the mem, is what carries the seed. Now, go back to what we learned about faith, Aman, which is mem nun, Aleph mem nun, that mem nun being the main root for that word. Here we have the mem nun being a root here when they spelled it with the mem nun. This is the faith being carried through the rod of Yahweh. And if you go back to the studies that we did on Aman, it's all about reproducing liquid with seed inside, remember? So the mem carries the seed through the rod and is collected into the tet, the basket that collects the seeds. So chew on that with Abba, and if you don't understand now, he will show you. Now the next root I want to talk about is the mem ayin, and we've talked about this one before. It is the word for belly, and we know that everything to do with the belly, the gut, is about an unknowing knowing. That's where we get the gut feeling from. You have an unknowing knowing, and that's because that's where digestion takes place of the seeds that you have received. Remember, the ancient Hebrews said that the gut is the seat of the unconscious mind where one's instinct resides. Now, I want to talk about ayin by itself for a few minutes because we know that ayin is all about our experience. It's the eye. It's about what we see. But it is also about receiving. And it's interesting because if you look at pei and ayin, they look almost the same, just with the dot in the middle of the ayin, right? And we know that pei not only talks about speaking and blowing, but it also talks about receiving, because your mouth is a place where you receive food and drink. And there are several models of this pei, this mouth, more than one on a body. And this is about receiving messages, while the ayin is a place of receiving. We receive through what we see. And remember, I think I mentioned before that Abba always told me that the eyes and the ears are the windows to the soul, and a doorway, not just a window. Our ayin is a doorway. He is entering. We are entering. Okay, so now we are going to talk about Lashem. So Mata Lashem. Now Lashem is the word Shem with a lamed in front of it. I want to mention really quick that the word Lashem in itself is also the meaning of an unknown stone. And there is not really any information on that, but I believe that it has something to do with the stone that it talks about in Revelation chapter 2. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Ruach says to the assemblies. To him who overcomes, I shall give him some of the hidden manna, that's memnun. The manna comes from the shamayim, does not come from man. I will give some of the hidden manna, hidden knowledge, and I shall give him a white stone, and on the stone a renewed name written, which no one knows except who receives it. Now, I know the teaching of that we're all going to get new names. I don't know, but to me this talks about the name of Yahweh, and we're going to talk about why no one knows this name except who receives it. Nobody, because it's more than just a name. So we're going to come back to that, but we're going to focus on the word Shem. And I can't even begin to tell you how important this is. So the word Shem, Shin Mem, is about breath, and it means to breathe. If you look in the lexicon, it doesn't even mention the word name. And the reason for that is because it doesn't have anything to do with a name like we think of a name. The word name comes with this westernized definition of what our world looks at as a name today. And that's not what Shem means. So the ancient Hebrews believed that the wind or breath of something is its character. The breath of a man is what makes him what he is. Okay, this is just too amazing. So think for a second about Shin Mem. Okay, so think about the meanings. Separation of water. So we know Shin has a lot to do with separation. Mem is the water. Now think first of all about the models of separation of water in Scripture. Okay, think about the parting of the Red Sea, where they moved down the center, the prescribed path through dry land as the water was separated, and the same thing at the Jordan River. And this all has so much significance, and of course all about our salvation. But he's been showing us this model of a prescribed path for a while, and first time he really taught that to us is in the word ruach, because that's where it's found, which is all about a prescribed path like wind. And think about the model of our breath, of the prescribed path of inhalation and exhalation, and how going through our bodies, that's kind of like a separation of water. Think about how much of our body is made up of liquid, and then the pathways of the breath going in and out is where the separation is. Now, when we're talking about the Ruach, we know that we're talking about the breath of Yahweh. This is all the same message, guys. All of Abba's Otiot and all of his words are to just give us more and more confirmation about the same message. YHWH. It's about your path of life and how you are guided. If you're guided by Yahweh's Ruach and you're in his wind, that is really the meaning of Torah. This is very important because when people hear the word Torah, they think of a book or written words, but the word Torah just means your path in life, your directional flow, the way that you go in life. It's the way that you're taught to go, but if we're supposed to be walking by the living word, it's not something that is seen or something that can even be explained. It is only something that can come from Yahweh in the unseen, from his heart to ours. And this is how he walks with us through life, and he directs us, and this is how he did it with all of the patriarchs. I know I'm saying that over and over again through these messages, but it is so important to understand that we are to be directed by the living word. And again, this is what Hebrews 11 is all about. Okay, I'm going to remind you of another confirmation about this. We've been talking about the wilderness, right? And how they were walking through the wilderness. And how did they know where to go? What did they follow? They followed the cloud that is made of water vapor. And how do clouds move? They move by the wind. So if the clouds move by the wind, the Israelites were following the path of the wind. And they understood the wind to be a prescribed path. And this is how he was teaching them to follow his ruach. This is how he is teaching us to follow his ruach. How he guides us and what that means. And it's not the exact same for everyone. We are not all the same people. We do not have the same life experiences. He doesn't instruct us all from the same list of rules to follow. But the only ones who understand this are the ones who have eyes to see and ears to hear. Think about how the wind is unseen. Think about how our breath is unseen. And think about how seeds are carried in the wind. The way that a lot of plants were designed was for the wind to come along and pick up the seeds and then blow the seeds wherever Yahweh wants the seeds to spread. So this is about Yahweh planting seeds in us and planting seeds through us. It is never us who really plants the seed. It is him through us. He uses us as vessels to plant seeds. So when you look in the lexicon, you will also see that this word is used to describe desolate, which is emptiness. And the reason for that is because it's the negative side. See, sometimes man has gotten confused with this negative and positive meanings. This is why Alan would, get driven nuts. Remember when he would pull up Strong's Concordance and he'd read us all the names, all the different definitions of one word, and some of them would be opposite of each other. And he would just go crazy. And this is why. And desolate is the other meaning of Shem because it's void of his breath, void of his Shem, void of his name, and without the filling. The filling of the Ruach of Yahweh is about him filling us. This planting place of Lashem is about him filling us, his living word, planting his seed in us. This is why our breath is one of the ways that we can tell that we are alive, and when somebody stops breathing, they are dead or will be dead soon. Ways how you check to see if somebody is alive. Are they breathing? Do they have breath? So here we are now in connection with this whole life versus death thing. So desolate and emptiness, being without breath, being dead, without the filling of his ruach. And you know how many times in scripture it talks about those who are dead. They have the reputation of being filled, but they are in fact dead spiritually. This is because they don't have the breath of Yahweh, his ruach. They don't have his name. And it's not because they're not speaking his name as a word. It's because they have no understanding. They're not being filled because they're not seeking. Now, another root here in this whole word Lashem, the root lamed mem, meaning staff of might. So here we go with this total connection to the rod again. This is all about his rod. What does his rod represent? It represents his counsel, his wisdom, his dispersing of his living word in us, working in us, that mem. And that is how we are being led. Lamed is all about being led. So the lamed being in the front of this word is being led by his breath, his wind, his prescribed path for us Nobody else knows our path but Him. Only He knows our calling, and only He knows our purpose. And He reveals these things to us throughout our lives. But that really brings me to the best word or words and ways that I could think of to describe Shem and what Lashem really means, having His name, is about purpose. A lot of people say that Shem means character. That's part of it. But it's more about our purpose that is given by Him, as well as what steers us. His Shem, His breath, His name, and the planting of it inside us is about, now that we have His Shem, His breath, His inner workings inside of us, flowing through us, we are now being led and directed by that. Why? Because He then speaks to our hearts and minds, and that is how He leads us. Okay, so I'm going to cut the study there, even though there's so much more. The next video will pick up where we left off. We'll be going really deep into the Sheen, and we're going to continue talking about the Sheen Mem together, because there's more. And we're also going to talk about the importance of Zikar, and how Abba told us all throughout His word to Zikar His name, remember His name. Zikar is a huge part of the key, and it goes deeper than just remembering. We will talk about the name Yahuwah and the root meanings of His name. We'll also be going into the meaning of Shamayim, which comes from Shem, and we're going to talk more about the negative and positive meanings as well, and the convergence that we're seeing manifest in the world today. So, and be talking to Abba about all of these things, and if you notice, throughout this entire study, he is over and over and over again teaching us about Himself and His Word and His Ruach and how they work together in us. It's the simplest of simple messages, but He knew that it would be so lost. He gave us so many different models. And so that's what we're doing. We're just going through all these different words, all these different scriptures, all these different signs, and all these different models and life experiences that He gave us, all to teach us about the same thing: relationship with Him. He just wants His kids back. He wants relationship with His children. That's all. And so until next time, where we will continue this message on the planting place of name, I love you guys so much. Stay yoked. Shalom.
Gotta get a message to my baby's heart. Can anybody tell me how to begin, or even where to start? Western Union can't deliver this part. Ooh yeah, her heart is beating only for me, but somebody else has got it under a lock, and is throwing away no keys. So here I stand, just like the space in between. Now she's the sunrise in my morning. Yeah, she's the headache that don't go away. But I'm committed, I'm bound to this love I found, going all the way down, highway to her heart. Oh yeah. Well, I don't mind the detour signs in the road. I don't mind slowing down for bumps and curves. No, I can handle the load. But night gets dark and this heart gets out of control. Ooh yeah, off in the distance, through every mile, I sense her touch, feel her lips move across my smile. Head on collision with the love that's driving me wild. Now she's the sunrise in my morning. Yeah, she's the headache that don't go away. But I'm committed, I'm bound to this love I found, going all the way down, highway to her heart. Yeah, I'm going down, down, highway, highway, highway to her heart. Oh, going down, down, highway to her heart. Yeah, she's the sunrise in my morning. She's the headache that don't go away. But I'm committed, I'm bound to this love I